What's up guys, welcome to Poor Man Mods. In the last video of this 1UZ swap series, I ripped out the 2JZ of my IS300. In this video, we're gonna figure out some plumbing issues. I will be deleting ABS in this car because pretty much when doing the swap, you have two options: relocate the ABS or delete it. And relocating it seems like a whole lot more work than deleting it, and I deleted it in my Supra, and I don't regret it. So I'm gonna be deleting it, and it shouldn't cost much money at all. And the other thing we're gonna try to figure out is the fuel system, how to connect the IS300 to the 1UZ. Not too janky, but we're not doing AN fitting, so we're gonna figure that out. I already have all the brake lines labeled in this engine bay. Let's get into it. So I'm not sure if it's gonna help out a ton or not, but I did label the lines going into the ABS module here. This line right here is the front right out. This line right here is the front in. This line right here is the front left out. Here is the rear left out and the right rear out. And then back here on the front, really hard to see, is the rear in. Over here on the master cylinder, this is the front brake line going into the ABS module. This is the rear brake line going into the ABS module. So this controls the front brakes, this controls the rear brakes. And down in here, you can see two fittings. Those are the two rear brake lines. Those are going from the ABS module to the rear of the car. This brake line right here is coming out of the ABS pump, going to the front left brake caliper. Very difficult to see, but this brake line here is coming out of the ABS pump, going to the front right caliper. What my plan is to have one brake line coming out of the master cylinder here, and then we're gonna tee off and have one short brake line going to the front left caliper and have the other one wrapping around back to the front right. Then have our rear brake line come out, tee off again, and go to the two fittings down there. Pretty simple. We're gonna try to reuse these old fittings on the car if we can. These are probably gonna be metric thread, and most of the brake line fittings you're gonna find at your local auto parts store are standard 3/8 by 24. So these aren't gonna be able to thread into like T fittings and stuff that you can get at the store. Honestly, the first thing I'm gonna do is just crack these lines loose and let the system bleed and get all the fluid out. And it's gonna take a while to drain all this fluid. I don't feel like working with a mess. Check this out, how cool is this? This is a ratcheting 10mm flare wrench. I will have a link in the description down below for one of these if you want one for yourself. All right, got the ABS module removed from the car along with all the brake lines. I did not show a step-by-step on how I made these brake lines, but I will show you what I made and how it's gonna connect to the car. It's pretty straightforward. It just takes a little bit of planning and some patience, and I just had to buy a few fittings and two T's and some brake line. This costs like 30 or 40 bucks in materials rather than buying a $350 delete kit. So let me show you what I made. This line right here is the front brake line coming off the master cylinder, comes up and swoops down just like the factory line, and it goes to a T. That T is gonna go to two brake lines. This is one of them. This is the front left brake line. This is the OEM brake line, which I cut up and put a flare on it. This is the standard 3/16 fitting. So this will go right from the T down to the caliper, and you have the OEM metric fitting on the end. This has the metric fitting that'll go to the brake hose in the wheel well, and this goes across the engine bay. And this is the standard fitting that will go to that T. So that's for the front brakes. For the rear brakes, I took the OEM brake line coming off the master cylinder, still got some fluid in it, and I cut it up a little bit and have it going to a T, which will go to the two rear brake lines underneath the car. Pretty straightforward, just took a little bit of planning. And now we'll get them in the car, and hopefully they don't leak. All right, we got everything installed. Let's take a look at it. Here is the front line coming down. to a T, that goes to the front left caliper, and then that copper line comes all the way across, down in there to the front right caliper. Then we have the rear brake line coming up and over, then down to our T, which takes us to the rear brakes. Pretty simple. Now we have a lot more room over here and less weight. Also right here on the master cylinder, there was a hose that went directly to the ABS module. I removed the line and then put a rubber cap on the master cylinder. But now I want to move on to the fuel system, or the fuel line. Coming off of the 1UZ, I have the factory fuel line coming off the rail, and that has a M14 by 1.5 inverted flare female fitting. And on the car, down at the bottom, kind of near where those brake fittings were, is a male M14 by 1.5 inverted flare fitting. There's a couple different ways you go about connecting this fuel system. Some people go baller and do AN lines. You could just cut the fittings and flare the ends a little bit and hose clamp it with fuel injection hose, of course. I'm gonna go kind of in the middle of that. I bought two M14 by 1.5 inverted flare fittings. One is a female thread with a hose barb. The other is a male thread with a hose barb. And I got some fuel injection hose, 5/16 fuel hose, I believe. I'm gonna try to connect the fitting at the engine bay area and then connect it to the engine. What I'm trying to do here is see if this system will work. I wanna make sure that the fittings don't leak. And if there's a leak that I can't fix, I'm going to change my approach to this. But I wanted to do this with the engine out of the car. I just think it's gonna make it a lot easier. So I've got this 3-foot length of fuel injection hose with a fuel injection clamp. I'm gonna install it in the car, wheel the engine as close as I can to connect it, turn on the fuel pump, and see if we have a leak. Hopefully we don't. It is very important to note, if you are going to do this fuel line option, you need to use fuel injection hose and fuel injection clamps. Regular fuel line is not going to cut it. You need something that can withstand the long-term pressures of fuel injection. And there is no return line for this system, which is nice. It should make setting up this fuel line a lot easier. We only have to deal with a feed. Makes total sense, but with the ECU out of the car, you cannot turn on the fuel pump. I have my power probe here. I took out the fuel pump relay, which was actually really difficult. It did not want to come out. But I'm going to send power to this pin right here, and this will trigger the fuel pump. If you send power to this one, I think it makes the pump run backwards. But when you send power to this one, you can hear noises happen up here. And it sounds like we have a leak. So, oh, there it is. I think we have an injector leak. Yes. Okay. So we are having some fuel leak issues, which that is why I did this out of the car. If I would have put this in the engine, doing any kind of work around here would have been an absolute nightmare. So now I got to fix the leaks. Fix the fuel leak. It was 2 O-rings on the injectors on the right side of the engine. Now I can apply power. Still gonna put my safety glasses on. Pressurizing the pump. And I don't see it peeing anywhere. So I believe we have fixed the fuel leaks. Now that the fuel system is not leaking anymore, I feel pretty good about that. We can go ahead and I think we can start test fitting the engine. And I'm also going to install the wiring harness and the Spitronics ECU on the engine. If you guys don't have a power probe, I highly, highly recommend getting one. Not the cheapest tool in the world, but it is a total game changer and lifesaver. After the first time using it, it pays for itself. I mean, just being able to apply power to a relay like this, freaking love it. Here's my engine management solution, Spitronics Mercury 2. I'm going away from the factory ECU and harness. This comes with its own kind of plug and play harness. It's very basic, very simple, but apparently it works pretty well, and it does support VVTi. So I'm going to test fit the harness, see what needs to be done with that, and then move on to test fitting the engine in the bay. Making some progress here, got the serpentine belt on, not too exciting, and got the harness hooked up. At first I thought there were some issues with it, but it just turns out I was being a mouth breather. But this does come numbered, so fuel injectors 1, 3, 5, and 7 on this side, 2, 4, 6, 8 on the right side. And it plugs into this VVTi sensor here. It does not utilize either cam sensor. We have our crank sensor down here. Here's our map sensor. We're going away from the factory MAF. We're going to map, which is much, much better. Back here, there is nothing for the starter, so you will need to do your own starter circuit. I cut up the original GS400 harness and stole this connector for the starter. I think these two are actually for the knock sensor, which we won't need, but this is for the starter, so that'll be our starter circuit. Back here is a connector for the flap, the secondary runners in the intake manifold. Got the coils plugged in, the injectors. Like I said, the cam sensor is not utilized. Over here, I believe this is supposed to be for the coolant temperature sensor. It would not plug in, so once again, I cut off the connector from my GS400 harness, and I'll just be able to splice that, no problem at all. It did come with a throttle position sensor connector also, which was on this side, and I thought it was supposed to go here. And at first I thought it was too short, but like I said, I was being a mouth breather, and it's actually down in there. So that's where it plugs into for that. I also stole off my GS400 harness, the connector for the air conditioning, the power steering, and the alternator. So those things we will have to wire up ourselves once this is in the car. Forgive me, I did not record this, but I am converting this engine to drive-by cable, not drive-by-wire. In stock form, when you made this full throttle, the throttle plate would only open about 20% of the way. Unfortunately, I did this off camera, but I put a little plastic piece in here. I forget who I got it from, but I'll try to link it in the description down below. But there's a piece that converts this to drive-by cable, so this actually actuates the throttle the whole way. So now it's working proper. I'll need to extend the cable or get a different one. But yeah, this engine is pretty much ready to start testing for fitment. I also got an oil filter relocation kit, so now I have 2 AN fittings coming off here, and I'm probably gonna have to modify that header a little bit with a hammer, so we'll see. But this was just for testing. I wanted to get the testing out of the way before we start fitting it. I also got a bunch of stuff from XAET Racing, including their billet aluminum swap engine mounts. Now, I did modify these off camera. I actually added some rubber. I machined out this bottom piece of the mount and put some polyurethane in there to try to absorb some vibration. But these should allow this motor to directly swap in without a problem. And they're super beefy, and now that there's a little bit of rubber play in them, it should be perfect. All right, here we go, installing the engine for the first time, and of course we ran into some fitment issues. We were hitting the power steering pump, so we removed that, and we were also hitting the firewall, so we marked that, massaged pretty much the whole firewall, used a 2x4 to get into a tight spot, and of course we were hitting the header on the steering rack. So we torched the header, beat the crap out of it, and test fitted the engine again. And upon test fitting it this time, we ran into issues with the cross member. After more test fitting, the header keeps hitting the rack right there. So I came up with an idea. I'm not sure if it's going to be a viable solution or not, but I thought about moving the whole rack towards the driver's side. I undid that bracket there and was able to slide it about 1 inch. Moved that bracket there, and what I'm thinking is maybe I can make a bracket to, like C-clamp around there, and that way shift the whole rack that way, and then obviously I'll need an alignment. I'm not sure if this will be a viable solution, but I'm going to try. Might need different tie rods or something, but we're going to give it a shot. Moving the steering rack to the driver's side 1 inch worked beautifully. We were clear of that, but now we are hitting the frame here, and we're going to clearance this. See if we can make some room. Maybe clearance over here too, but absolutely this area. So the oil pan was actually sitting on top of the cross member, so we torched it up and beat the absolute crap out of it to clear the oil pan, and then we took a break for Connor to do a burnout. I'm going to try to modify this power steering pump. This power steering pump did not come with my motor. I ordered this, and I kind of incorrectly ordered it, but this was listed for a SC430, I think, which this is some kind of progressive steering valve which sticks out pretty far and hits the frame rail. There's other pumps that don't have that, that just have this banjo adapter on it. I went to the junkyard today and got this off of a 2000 Tundra with the 2UZ. So very similar engine. I can't use the pump though because it's on the incorrect side. So this pump, this banjo fitting is on this side, which is where I need it to be. And this pump, it's on the inside. I don't think I'll have room to run this pump, but what I can do is swap this over. These are the same thread. So got it threaded in there. I'm also not going to utilize this. This is like the idle up valve for the power steering. I'm not going to utilize this. I think I might plug it also. I don't think it's going to be necessary for this car, but I'm going to see if this will work. I'm not going to throw away this piece just yet. If I have to, I'll massage the frame rail, but I'm going to try this first and then just use a regular banjo hose. So going to try to do away with this thing. And there is effectively our difference in height. Maybe a little less than a ½ inch. See if that gives us the room we need. So what I did with this idle up valve is I pretty much just whacked off the plastic piece, tapped out the center valve portion, grinded off the funnel piece, and then filled it with weld to basically make it a plug for cheap. Alright, got the power steering issues figured out. I did not put the power steering pump back on this engine. I'm going to install it when I pull the engine back out. So at this point, we're pretty much finished the test fitting phase for the engine itself. Had to clearance the headers a lot. The power steering rack is still unbolted. I'm going to make brackets to re-secure that once the swap is finished. I'll get under the car and pretty much get the rack as close to the header as I can, and then make a bracket for that. That way, I have to do as little as possible to like the tie rods and everything to make that work. But yeah, we're finished testing the motor. We're gonna pull it back out, and then in the next episode, we're gonna move on to the transmission. I am going from a W55 to a W58, and there's a lot of stuff that's gonna be going on with that. So look forward to that. But hope you guys are enjoying this so far. I'm very excited for this. Take a look just how far back this engine is sitting. It's behind the front sway bar. Most of the engine is behind the strut tower. I think this is gonna do a lot for weight distribution and handling, and I'm really excited for it. A lot of people keep saying I should have done a 2J for more power, but a 2J only improves power. It's not gonna improve handling like this. This is gonna completely change the whole car, and I'm really looking forward to it. So hope you guys are enjoying this series, and we'll see you in the next part where it's gonna be all about the transmission.